My husband sent me a text from New Orleans, freshly married to my sister. "You were never enough, Marin. She actually makes me feel alive." I replied, "Cool." Then I canceled every credit card with his name on it and had the locks changed before sunrise. By noon the next day, lawyers were calling. "Hello everyone, thank you for joining me today. Before I share what happened to me, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. It really means the world to me." But now, to my story. It was a Thursday. Isn't it strange how your brain clings to details like that? As if remembering the day of the week could somehow make sense of the betrayal that shattered everything. It was a Thursday afternoon when my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I was 47 years old, standing in the home I'd lived in for 22 years, folding laundry that smelled like lavender detergent. The sun was pouring through the window over the sink, and I remember thinking how peaceful everything felt. My husband, Garrett, had told me he was going to New Orleans for a work conference. Something about architectural restoration projects along the Gulf Coast. He was a contractor, and these trips weren't unusual. I'd kissed him goodbye 4 days earlier, watched him load his suitcase into his truck, and told him to bring me back beignet mix. That's what a good wife does, right? She asks for souvenirs and believes her husband when he says he'll miss her. I'd even packed him snacks for the drive, homemade trail mix and those peanut butter cookies he loved. I'd ironed his shirts and made sure he had everything he needed. Because that's what I did. I took care of him. The text came through at 2:47 p.m. I know because I checked the timestamp 100 times afterward, like I was trying to find proof that I'd imagined it. "Just married your sister," it read. "Thought you should know. You were never enough, Marin. She actually makes me feel alive." No emojis. No explanation. Just cold, clean cruelty delivered in 2 sentences. My sister. Pascal. The same Pascal who'd cried on my shoulder 6 months ago about her 3rd divorce. The same Pascal who'd stayed in our guest room for 8 weeks while she got back on her feet. The same Pascal who'd sat at my kitchen table, drinking my coffee, eating my food, and told me how lucky I was to have a man like Garrett. I'd comforted her through her heartbreak, lent her money, let her live in my home rent-free. And this was how she repaid me. I stood there, staring at my phone, waiting for the punchline. Waiting for him to say it was a joke, some sick prank that would make sense in a minute. But my phone stayed silent. The only sound was the dryer tumbling in the laundry room and my own shallow breathing. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything or collapse on the floor like they do in the movies. I just stood there with a dish towel in my hand, and I felt something inside me go completely cold. It was like a switch flipped. 22 years of marriage, of cooking his favorite meals, of supporting his business, of believing we were building something together, all of it just evaporated. I thought about the way Pascal had looked at him during Sunday dinners. The way she'd laughed too loud at his jokes. The way she'd touched his arm when she talked. The way she'd borrowed my car to run errands and come back hours later, smelling like cologne that wasn't mine. And I'd told myself I was being paranoid. I'd told myself to stop being insecure, to stop seeing things that weren't there. What a fool I'd been. What an absolute fool. I picked up my phone, and with hands that didn't even shake, I typed back one word, cool. Then I opened my banking app and got to work. If Garrett wanted to destroy our marriage, fine. But he wasn't going to destroy me in the process. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, drop a broken heart in the comments. You're not alone. And please, hit that subscribe button, because what happens next will shock you. By the time the sun set that Thursday, I'd already dismantled Garrett's entire life. I called the credit card companies first, all four of them. I told them my cards had been compromised and requested immediate freezes and reissues. Cards that had his name on them as an authorized user? Cancelled. Gone. Within minutes, every single card stopped working. I imagined him trying to pay for dinner with my sister, the card declining, the humiliation on his face. The thought made me smile. Then I called our bank and moved half of everything in our joint account into a new account in only my name. Legally, it was my right. We lived in a community property state, and I wasn't about to let him drain our savings to fund his disgusting little honeymoon with my sister. I transferred $47,000 in less than 10 minutes. Our savings account, the one we'd built together for retirement, for emergencies, for the future we were supposed to have, I took my half and secured it where he couldn't touch it. I even called the locksmith and paid extra for same-day service. By 9 p.m., every lock on every door had been changed. The locksmith, a kind older man named Frank, asked if everything was okay. I told him my husband had lost his keys. It was easier than explaining the truth. By the time Frank left, I had 6 shiny new keys on my keyring, and Garrett had none. I sat on the porch with a glass of wine, watching the locksmith drive away, and I felt powerful. Not sad. Not broken. Powerful. For years, I'd made myself small to make Garrett feel big. I'd swallowed my opinions, dimmed my light, shrunk my dreams. And for what? So he could betray me with the one person in the world who should have protected me? No. I was done being small. I was done being the woman who accepted scraps of affection and called it love. I was done being a fool. Garrett started calling around midnight. I didn't answer. He called 16 times in a row, and then the texts started flooding in. What the hell did you do, Marin? You can't just lock me out of my own house. This is illegal. Answer your phone. You're being crazy. I read every single one with a smile on my face, sipping my wine, feeling calmer than I had in years. Each message was more frantic than the last, more desperate, more pathetic. And I felt nothing. No guilt. No second guessing. Just cold satisfaction. Then I blocked his number. Pascal tried calling too, but I'd already blocked her hours earlier. I didn't need to hear her excuses or her fake apologies. I didn't need her to tell me she didn't mean for it to happen or that the heart wants what it wants or whatever other cliché justification she'd concocted. I knew exactly who my sister was. She'd always been jealous of me. Always. When we were kids, she'd steal my toys and break them just so I couldn't have them. When we were teenagers, she'd flirt with every boy I liked. And now, as grown women, she'd stolen my husband. Except this time, I wasn't going to cry about it. This time, I was going to fight back. Friday morning, I woke up to pounding on my front door. I looked through the peephole and saw 2 police officers standing on my porch. My heart jumped into my throat, but I opened the door calmly, smoothing down my hair and putting on my most composed expression. "Mrs. Calloway?" one of them asked. He was young, maybe late 20s, with kind eyes. I nodded. "We received a call from your husband. He says you've locked him out of his home and stolen money from shared accounts. He's requested a welfare check and wants to file a report." I almost laughed. Of course he'd called the cops. Of course he'd tried to play the victim, to make me look like the crazy, vindictive wife. I invited the officers inside, offered them coffee, and calmly explained the situation. I showed them the text message. I showed them my bank statements, proving I'd only taken what was legally mine. I explained that I had every right to change the locks on a home that was solely in my name, something Garrett conveniently forgot to mention when he called the police. The house had been inherited from my grandmother. Garrett's name wasn't on the deed. They looked uncomfortable, but they took notes. One of them, the older officer with gray at his temples, even looked at me with something like pity. "Ma'am, this sounds like a civil matter," he said gently. "We can't force you to let him back in. If he wants to dispute this, he'll need to take it up with a lawyer." I thanked them, offered them cookies from a tin on my counter, and watched them leave. But as I closed the door, I knew this was only the beginning. Garrett wasn't going to give up easily. He'd fight me. He'd try to take everything. He'd paint me as the villain, the bitter wife who couldn't handle his happiness. But I didn't care. Let him fight. I was ready for war. And unlike him, I had nothing left to lose. Can you believe he called the cops on me? Comment karma if you think he got what he deserved. And don't forget to like this video. Pascal showed up at my door on Saturday morning. I didn't expect her to have the audacity, but there she was, standing on my porch in her wrinkled sundress, mascara smudged under her eyes like she'd been crying for hours. She looked smaller than I remembered. Weaker. Older. Her hair, usually perfectly styled, hung limp around her face. Her hands were shaking. "Marin, please," she said through the door. I didn't open it. I just stood on the other side, arms crossed, staring at her blurry shape through the frosted glass. "There's nothing to explain, Pascal," I said. My voice was calm, ice cold. "You married my husband. In secret. In New Orleans. That's all I need to know." She started sobbing. Loud, ugly sobs that echoed down the quiet suburban street. The neighbors were probably watching from behind their curtains, judging, gossiping. Mrs. Henderson across the street was definitely peeking through her blinds. I didn't care. Let them see what kind of person my sister really was. Let the whole neighborhood know. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she wailed, her voice cracking. "We didn't plan it. We connected, Marin. He understands me in a way no one ever has. He sees me. Really sees me." I felt bile rise in my throat. Connected? They connected? What about the 22 years Garrett and I had connected? What about the mortgage we'd paid together, the vacations we'd taken, the life we'd built brick by brick? What about the nights I'd held him when his father died, the days I'd worked double shifts to help him start his business, the years I'd believed in him when no one else did? But I didn't say any of that. I just asked her one question: how long? Silence. Long, heavy silence that stretched between us like a chasm. I could hear her breathing on the other side of the door, ragged and uneven. Then, finally, in a voice so small I almost didn't hear it, "A year. A year." They'd been sneaking around behind my back for an entire year. While she lived in my house. While she sat at my table and ate meals I'd cooked. While she cried to me about her loneliness and I comforted her like the good big sister I thought I was. While I'd driven her to job interviews, lent her clothes, helped her apply for apartments. Every kind word, every gesture of support, every moment of sisterly love, it had all been a lie. She'd been betraying me the entire time, probably laughing about it behind my back. I felt something crack inside me, but I still didn't cry. I just unlocked the door and opened it. Pascal looked up at me, hopeful, like I was about to forgive her. Like I was about to hug her and tell her it was all okay, that we'd work through this, that family was forever. Her eyes were red and swollen, her nose running. She looked pitiful. Pathetic. Instead, I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "You didn't just betray me, Pascal. You destroyed the last bit of family I had." Our parents are dead. It was just you and me. And you chose him. Her face crumpled like paper. Marin, please, get off my property, I said, my voice steady and cold. And don't ever come back. You're not my sister anymore. As far as I'm concerned, you died the moment you got into bed with my husband. I shut the door in her face and locked it. I listened to her cry on my porch for 10 more minutes before she finally left. I heard her car start, heard her drive away, and only then did I allow myself to feel anything. But even then, it wasn't sadness. It was rage. Pure, white-hot rage at the injustice of it all. That night, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was Garrett, using someone else's phone. You're going to regret this, Marin. I'll take everything from you. The house. The savings. Everything. You think you can just cut me off? I built this life. You were just along for the ride. I stared at that message for a long time, reading it over and over. And then I started making phone calls. If Garrett wanted a war, he was going to get one. Would you forgive a sister who did this? Let me know in the comments. And if you're loving this story, smash that like button. Monday morning, I walked into the office of Devin Pritchard, the toughest divorce attorney in our county. I'd done my research over the weekend, reading reviews, comparing success rates, and asking for recommendations in a private online forum for divorced women. Devin came highly recommended. She had a reputation for being ruthless, for taking cheating husbands to the cleaners, for never backing down. She was in her late 50s, with silver hair cut into a sharp bob and a handshake that could crack bones. Her office was on the 3rd floor of a modern building downtown, all glass and steel and power. Tell me everything, she said, sliding a legal pad across her mahogany desk. So I did. I told her about the text. About Pascal. About the year-long affair. About Garrett's threats. I told her about the money I'd moved, the locks I'd changed, the police visit. I told her everything, holding nothing back, letting it all spill out like poison from a wound. She listened without interrupting, her pen flying across the paper, and when I finished, she looked up at me with a smile that was almost predatory. Mrs. Calloway, she said, leaning back in her leather chair, your husband just made the biggest mistake of his life. Devin explained that because Garrett had married Pascal while still legally married to me, his second marriage was void. Bigamy wasn't just morally wrong, it was illegal. In our state, it was even a felony punishable by up to 5 years in prison. We can use this, Devin said, tapping her pen on the desk. He's opened himself up to criminal charges. But more importantly, this affair, and the fact that he spent marital assets on it, gives us massive leverage in the divorce. We're going to take him to the cleaners. By the time I'm done with him, he'll wish he'd never laid eyes on your sister. I felt a surge of satisfaction so strong it almost made me dizzy. For the first time since Thursday, I felt like I wasn't just reacting. I was in control. Devin walked me through the process step by step. We'd file for divorce immediately, citing adultery and fraud. We'd subpoena financial records going back 3 years to prove he'd been using our money to fund his affair. We'd demand full ownership of the house, the majority of our savings, and spousal support. We'd also file a motion for him to pay my legal fees. What about Pascal? I asked. Devin's smile widened. Leave her to me. If she has any assets at all, we can potentially go after her for alienation of affection. It's an old law, but it's still on the books in this state. We can make her life very difficult. I liked Devin immediately. She wasn't just a lawyer, she was a warrior. And she was on my side. By Wednesday, the papers were filed. Garrett was served at the cheap motel where he and Pascal were staying, a rundown place on the edge of town that rented rooms by the week. I wasn't there to see his face, but I heard about it later from the process server, a woman named Jax who'd been doing this job for 15 years. Apparently, Garrett had turned white as a sheet when he saw the papers. His hands had trembled as he'd read through them. Pascal had been in the room too, and when she'd seen what was happening, she'd locked herself in the bathroom and refused to come out. The process server said she could hear Pascal sobbing through the door, wailing about how everything was ruined. Good. Let her suffer. Let them both suffer the way they'd made me suffer. The next day, I got a call from Devin. He wants to negotiate, she said, and I could hear the amusement in her voice. I laughed. Actually laughed out loud. Tell him no, I said. We're going to court. Devin paused. Marin, are you sure? Court is expensive. It's brutal. It'll drag this out for months, maybe even a year. And it'll all be public record. Everyone will know the details. I didn't hesitate. I'm sure, I said. I want him to suffer the way he made me suffer. I want everyone to know what kind of man he is. There was a moment of silence, and then Devin said, I like you, Mrs. Calloway. We're going to win this. And I believed her. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't backing down. I wasn't playing nice. I wasn't being the good wife who swallowed her pride and accepted crumbs. I was done. And I was going to make sure Garrett paid for every lie, every betrayal, every moment of pain he'd caused me. Drop a clapping hands, yes, clapping hands in the comments if you think she's doing the right thing. And please, share this video with anyone who needs to hear this story. The first court date was in November, 6 weeks after I'd filed for divorce. I dressed carefully that morning, a navy blue suit I'd bought specifically for this occasion, simple pearl earrings, my hair pulled back in a neat bun. I wanted to look composed. Professional. Strong. Like a woman who had her life together, not a woman whose husband had humiliated her in the worst possible way. I practiced my expression in the mirror, calm, collected, unshakable. I wasn't going to give Garrett the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Devin met me outside the courtroom, looking impeccable in a charcoal gray suit. She gave me a reassuring nod and squeezed my shoulder. Remember, she said, stay calm. Don't react to anything he says. Don't make faces. Don't roll your eyes. Let me do the talking. The judge will be watching you, assessing you. You need to be the sympathetic party here. I nodded, but my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I hadn't seen Garrett since the day he left for New Orleans. I didn't know if I was ready to face him, to sit in the same room and breathe the same air. But when I walked into that courtroom and saw him sitting at the defendant's table, I felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. No longing. Just cold, hard resolve. Garrett looked terrible. He'd lost weight, his suit hung loose on his frame. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his hair, usually neatly trimmed, was shaggy and unkempt. He looked like a man who wasn't sleeping, who wasn't eating, who was drowning in regret. His lawyer, a middle-aged man in a cheap suit with dandruff on his shoulders, looked nervous, shuffling papers and avoiding eye contact. Pascal wasn't there, thank God. I don't think I could have handled seeing both of them. Devin had told me that Pascal had been subpoenaed but had claimed illness. Convenient. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes and no-nonsense demeanor, called the court to order. Judge Ramona Blackwell. I'd looked her up. She had a reputation for being fair but tough, especially in cases involving infidelity. Devin stood and presented our case. She laid out the affair methodically, painting a picture of systematic betrayal and financial fraud. She showed the judge the bank statements, the jewelry purchase, the secret trips, the Venmo payments. She presented phone records showing hundreds of calls and texts between Garrett and Pascal, many of them during hours when he told me he was working. She even had testimony from the hotel in New Orleans where they'd stayed, confirming they'd checked in as Mr. and Mrs. Calloway. She painted a picture of a man who had betrayed his wife in every possible way, and she did it calmly, methodically, like a surgeon cutting away diseased tissue. Every piece of evidence was presented with precision, with clarity, with devastating effectiveness. Garrett's lawyer tried to argue that the marriage to Pascal was a mistake, that Garrett had been emotionally confused, that he was going through a midlife crisis and deserved compassion. He claimed that Garrett had contributed equally to the marital assets and deserved a fair division. He tried to paint me as vindictive, as a woman scorned who was trying to punish her husband out of spite. But every argument fell flat. The evidence was too damning. The judge wasn't having it. "Mr. Calloway," she said, her voice cutting through the courtroom like a blade, "you committed adultery. You used marital funds to support your mistress. You spent $12,000 of your wife's money on an engagement ring for another woman. And you entered into a bigamous marriage, which, as I'm sure you're aware, is a felony in this state. I suggest you stop wasting this court's time with excuses and start negotiating a settlement that reflects the severity of your actions." Garrett's face turned red. He opened his mouth to argue, but his lawyer put a hand on his arm and whispered something urgently. The judge set a date for mediation in 3 weeks and dismissed us. As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt lighter than I had in months. My shoulders, which had been tight with tension, relaxed. I could breathe fully for the first time in weeks. Garrett tried to follow me into the hallway, calling my name, his voice desperate. "Marin! Marin, please, can we just talk for a minute?" But Devon stepped between us like a guard dog. "You need to stay away from my client, Mr. Calloway," she said coldly. "Any communication needs to go through me. If you approach her again, I'll file for a restraining order." Garrett looked at me over Devon's shoulder, his eyes pleading, red-rimmed. He looked like he wanted to say something, to beg, to explain. I met his gaze and said, "See you in mediation, Garrett." Then I walked away, my heels clicking on the marble floor, and I didn't look back. Not even once. Comment Crown Queen Crown if you're proud of her for standing strong. And don't forget to like this video. 2 weeks after the court date, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. I'd been getting calls from reporters, apparently word had spread about the case, and some local journalists wanted to interview me. I declined all of them. "Marin?" It was Pascal. Her voice was raspy, like she'd been crying for days, like she'd been screaming into pillows. "Please don't hang up. I need to talk to you." I almost ended the call right there, my finger hovering over the red button. But curiosity got the better of me. "What do you want, Pascal?" I asked, my voice flat and emotionless. She took a shaky breath. "Garrett left me," she said. The words hung in the air between us. I froze, my grip tightening on the phone. "What?" "He left me," she repeated, and now she was crying, great heaving sobs. "He said it was a mistake. He said he never should have married me. He said he wants you back, Marin. He wants to fix things with you. He said I was just a distraction." I sat down on my couch, processing this information. Part of me wanted to feel victorious, to laugh in her face, to tell her she got exactly what she deserved. But mostly I just felt tired. Exhausted. "And you're telling me this why?" I asked. "Because I'm sorry," Pascal sobbed. I'm so sorry. I ruined everything. I ruined your marriage. I ruined our relationship. And now I have nothing. He kicked me out of the motel room. I don't have any money. I don't have anywhere to go. Mom and Dad are gone. I don't have any friends left. They all hate me when they found out what I did. I'm sleeping in my car, Maren. My car. I'm 43 years old and I'm homeless. I should have felt pity for her. She was my sister, after all. We'd shared a childhood, shared parents, shared memories. I remembered us as little girls, playing in the backyard, braiding each other's hair, promising we'd always be best friends. But I didn't feel pity. All I felt was a cold, detached anger that had settled in my bones and wouldn't leave. You made your choices, Pascal, I said. You knew what you were doing. You knew he was married. You knew he was my husband. You knew you were living in my house, eating my food, taking my kindness and throwing it back in my face. And you did it anyway. For a whole year, you looked me in the eye every single day and lied to me. I know, she whispered. I know, and I hate myself for it. But please, Maren. I need help. I hung up. I didn't want to hear any more. I didn't want her apologies or her excuses or her pleas for help. She'd burned that bridge, doused it in gasoline, and watched it explode. And I wasn't going to rebuild it. Not now. Not ever. Some things can't be forgiven. Some betrayals are too deep, too fundamental, too destructive. This was one of them. But Pascal's call haunted me for days. Not because I felt bad for her, but because it confirmed something I'd suspected all along: Garrett didn't love her. He'd never loved her. She was just a distraction, a midlife crisis, a way for him to feel young and desired again. A younger model, a shinier toy. And now that the fantasy had collapsed under the weight of reality, now that there were consequences and court dates and lawyers, he wanted to come crawling back to me. The audacity of it was almost funny. Almost. A week later, Garrett himself reached out. He sent me an email, long, rambling, pathetic. 3 full pages of justifications and excuses. He apologized for everything. He said he'd made a terrible mistake. He said he loved me, that he'd always loved me, and that he wanted to work things out. He blamed it on stress, on fear of aging, on feeling unappreciated. He even suggested couples therapy, as if we could just sit in a room with a therapist and work through the fact that he'd married my sister. I read the entire email once, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, and then I forwarded it to Devin with a single sentence: use this however you need to. Then I deleted it from my inbox, moved it to trash, emptied the trash, and blocked his email address. I was done giving Garrett second chances. I was done being the understanding wife who forgave everything. Some mistakes don't deserve forgiveness. Some people don't deserve redemption. And Garrett had proven, beyond any shadow of doubt, that he was one of those people. Should she ever forgive him? Vote yes or no in the comments. And please, share this story. Mediation was held in a sterile conference room with beige walls, fluorescent lighting, and bad coffee that tasted like burnt cardboard. Garrett sat across from me at a long rectangular table, looking like a shell of the man I'd married. His lawyer sat beside him, shuffling papers nervously, occasionally whispering things that made Garrett's jaw clench. Devin sat next to me, calm and composed as always, her briefcase full of ammunition. The mediator, a soft-spoken man in his 60s named Harold, explained the process and asked us to begin. He had kind eyes but a firm voice. He'd clearly done this 1,000 times before. Devin didn't waste time. She laid out our demands with surgical precision. I would keep the house, 70% of our savings, Garrett's truck, which was paid off and worth $35,000, and spousal support of $3,000 a month for 5 years. She also demanded he pay all my legal fees, which had already climbed to $18,000. Garrett's lawyer immediately objected, his face turning red. "That's absurd," he sputtered. "Mr. Calloway built that business from the ground up. He deserves at least half of everything. This is punitive, not equitable." Devin smiled that cold, predatory smile I'd come to love. "Your client committed adultery and fraud. He spent over $40,000 of marital funds on his affair. He's lucky my client isn't pressing criminal charges for bigamy." The mediation dragged on for hours. We took breaks every 90 minutes, during which I'd step outside and breathe fresh air, trying to calm my racing heart. Garrett tried to negotiate, but Devin held firm on every single point. His lawyer kept throwing out counteroffers, 60-40 split of savings, no spousal support, Garrett keeps the truck. Each time, Devin shot them down with evidence. She'd pull out another bank statement, another receipt, another damning piece of proof that Garrett had systematically betrayed and stolen from me. At one point, around hour 3, Garrett looked directly at me across that table and said, "Marin, please. Be reasonable. This is my life we're talking about. My business. My future. We were together for 22 years. That has to count for something." I stared at him, this man I'd spent half my life with, this man whose children I'd wanted to have, whose dreams I'd supported, whose life I'd built alongside mine. And I felt absolutely nothing. No love. No hatred. Just emptiness where he used to be. "You should have thought about that before you married my sister," I said quietly, my voice steady and cold. His face crumpled like I'd slapped him. "I made a mistake, Marin. People make mistakes. Don't I deserve a second chance?" I leaned forward slightly. "You didn't make a mistake, Garrett. You made a choice. Every single day for a year, you chose to betray me. Every lie, every secret meeting, every dollar you spent on her, those were choices. And now you get to live with the consequences." The mediator suggested we take a longer break, 30 minutes to cool down and reconsider our positions. I stepped outside into the hallway, and Devin followed me. "You're doing great," she said. "He's cracking. His lawyer knows they don't have a leg to stand on. We're going to win this." I nodded, but my hands were shaking. Not from fear or sadness. From adrenaline. From power. From the sheer satisfaction of watching Garrett squirm. When we reconvened, Garrett's lawyer made a counteroffer. I'd keep the house, Garrett would keep his business equipment and truck, and we'd split the savings 60-40 in my favor. No spousal support. "It's a fair offer," his lawyer said. "It acknowledges Mr. Calloway's wrongdoing while still allowing him to maintain his livelihood." Devin looked at me, waiting for my response. Her expression was neutral, but I could see the question in her eyes. Do we take it, or do we push harder? I thought about it for a long moment. I thought about the years I'd spent supporting Garrett's business, keeping his books, answering client calls at all hours, managing schedules while working my own full-time job as a medical office manager. I thought about the nights I'd stayed up worrying about money while he slept soundly beside me. I thought about the sacrifices I'd made, the career opportunities I'd turned down because they would have required moving, the friendships I'd let fade because Garrett didn't like my friends, the dreams I'd shelved because his dreams always came first. I thought about the affair, the lies, the betrayal. I thought about my sister, about the year they'd spent laughing at me behind my back. And then I said, "No deal." Garrett's lawyer looked exasperated. "Mrs. Calloway, you're being unreasonable. You're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. I leaned forward, my voice calm but firm. No, I said. I'm being fair. Your client used marital funds to have an affair with my sister. He bought her a $12,000 engagement ring with my money. He took her on trips with my money. He sent her thousands of dollars in cash with my money. He lied to me for a year, betrayed me in the worst possible way, and then threatened to take everything from me. So no, I'm not being unreasonable. I'm being generous by not pursuing criminal charges. This is my final offer: 70% of savings, the house, the truck, $3,000 monthly spousal support for 5 years, and he pays my legal fees. Take it or we go to trial. And trust me, a judge will be far less kind than I'm being. The room went silent. You could hear the clock ticking on the wall, the hum of the fluorescent lights. Even the mediator looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. Harold cleared his throat. Perhaps we should take another break. No, Garrett said suddenly, his voice broken and defeated. No more breaks. Fine. She can have it all. His lawyer started to protest, but Garrett cut him off. I said fine, he shouted, and everyone in the room flinched. She wins, okay? She wins. Give her whatever she wants. I don't care anymore. He put his head in his hands, and I thought for a moment he might cry. But I didn't feel sorry for him. Not even a little bit. He'd made his bed. Now he could lie in it. The mediator quickly drafted the agreement, and within an hour, we were both signing papers. Just like that, it was over. 22 years of marriage, dissolved with a few signatures. As I walked out of that conference room, papers in hand, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. I was free. Truly, completely free. Justice. Drop a flexed biceps, strong flexed biceps if you think she earned every penny. The divorce was finalized in February, 4 months after that awful Thursday text. I got the house, the savings, the truck, and the spousal support. Garrett got his tools, his business contacts, and a ruined reputation. Word had spread through our small town about what he'd done. Small towns are like that, everyone knows everyone's business, and his client base had shrunk dramatically. People were canceling contracts, leaving bad reviews, spreading the word that he wasn't trustworthy. Turns out people don't want to hire a contractor who cheats on his wife with her sister. They figure if he'll betray his family, he'll betray his clients too. Karma works in mysterious ways. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd had to let go of his 2 employees and was doing all the work himself now, scrambling to take any job he could get. Part of me felt satisfied. Part of me just felt tired. Pascal disappeared. I heard through mutual acquaintances, specifically, through our cousin Rita who still talked to her, that she'd moved to Arizona to live with a distant cousin she barely knew. She was working as a waitress at a diner, living in a studio apartment, and had apparently sworn off men entirely. She never reached out again, and I never tried to contact her. As far as I was concerned, I no longer had a sister. Some betrayals are too deep to forgive. Some wounds never heal. And I was okay with that. I didn't need her in my life. I didn't need her apologies or her attempts at reconciliation. I needed her to be gone, to be a closed chapter, to be someone I used to know. And that's exactly what she became. And Garrett? Last I heard, he was living in a 1-bedroom apartment across town, trying to rebuild his business and his life. He was dating someone new, a woman 10 years younger than him, which was predictable. Men like Garrett always think the solution to their problems is a younger woman. I didn't care. I'd moved on. The first few months after the divorce were strange. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, forgetting for a moment that Garrett was gone, reaching across the bed out of habit and finding empty space. Then I'd remember and feel a rush of relief. The house was mine. The bed was mine. My life was mine. I could do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, without asking permission or worrying about someone else's opinion. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. I started doing things I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. I took a pottery class at the community center and discovered I was actually pretty good at it. I made bowls and mugs and vases, my hands covered in clay, my mind finally quiet. I joined a book club with women from my neighborhood, and we'd meet every Thursday night to discuss novels and drink wine and laugh about life. I adopted a rescue dog named Copper, a scrappy terrier mix with one floppy ear and an attitude bigger than his body. He'd been abandoned at a shelter, left tied to the fence in the middle of the night, and something about his story resonated with me. We were both starting over. I painted the living room a color Garrett would have hated, a warm, cheerful yellow that made the whole space feel brighter, more alive. I hung new curtains, crisp white ones that let in more light. I bought plants, succulents and ferns and a fiddle-leaf fig that I named Bernard, and scattered them throughout the house. I rearranged furniture, donated things that reminded me of Garrett, and slowly, piece by piece, I made the space my own. It stopped being our house and became my house. And slowly, day by day, I started to heal. It wasn't easy. Some days I'd find myself crying over nothing, a song on the radio, a couple holding hands at the grocery store, a memory that hit me out of nowhere. I was grieving not for Garrett, but for the life I'd thought I had. The future I'd imagined. The person I'd been. That version of Marin, the dutiful wife, the loyal sister, the woman who always put everyone else first, she was gone. And I had to learn how to be someone new. But as winter turned to spring, I noticed something shifting inside me. The crying spells became less frequent. The anger started to fade. I was smiling more. Laughing more. I'd catch my reflection in a window and barely recognize the woman staring back at me. She looked lighter, younger, more alive. I felt lighter, freer, like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't even know was there. One Saturday morning in March, I was sitting on my back porch with a cup of coffee, watching Copper chase squirrels in the yard, and I realized something profound. I was happy. Not the fake, performative happiness I'd pretended to have during my marriage. Real happiness. Deep down, bone-deep happiness that came from somewhere inside me I'd forgotten existed. I'd lost a husband and a sister, but I'd gained myself. And that was worth more than any relationship. I pulled out my phone and looked at that text from Garrett one last time. The one I'd saved in a screenshot, the one that had started it all. Just married your sister. You were never enough. I used to read those words and feel pain, feel shame, feel like I'd failed somehow. Now I read them and felt nothing but pity for the small, insecure man who'd sent them. Then I deleted the screenshot and blocked the number for good. I didn't need to hold on to that anger anymore. I didn't need to carry that pain. I was done letting him take up space in my head. CTA, if this story inspired you, comment yellow heart healing yellow heart below. And please, subscribe. A year after the divorce, I sold the house. I know that sounds crazy after fighting so hard to keep it, but the truth is, it held too many memories. Too many ghosts. I'd walk through the rooms and remember conversations, arguments, moments of joy and pain all tangled together. I needed a fresh start, a clean slate, a place that was mine from the beginning. I bought a smaller place on the edge of town, a cute cottage with a big backyard, a stone fireplace, and a porch swing. It was perfect. Exactly what I needed. The first night I slept there, in my new bedroom with my new furniture and my new life, I felt peace for the first time in years. Copper loved it too. He'd run around the yard, barking at birds, digging holes I'd have to fill in later. It felt like home in a way the old house never had. I also did something I never thought I'd have the courage to do. I went back to school. I'd always wanted to be a teacher, but I'd put that dream on hold when I married Garrett. He'd convinced me it wasn't practical, that the pay wasn't good enough, that I should stick with my medical office job because it was stable. But I didn't want stable anymore. I wanted fulfilling. I wanted meaningful. So at 48 years old, I enrolled in a teacher certification program at the local community college. My classmates were mostly in their 20s, fresh-faced and full of energy, but they welcomed me warmly. If anything, they seemed to appreciate having someone older in the class, someone with life experience. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in decades. Learning, growing, becoming someone new. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. I studied late into the night, wrote papers, did practice teaching sessions. And I loved every minute of it. One afternoon in late September, I was at the farmer's market with Copper, picking out apples for a pie I wanted to try making, when I ran into someone from my past. His name was Kellen, and we'd gone to high school together. He'd been 2 years ahead of me, captain of the baseball team, always kind to everyone. He'd moved away years ago but had recently returned to take care of his aging mother who had dementia. We got to talking, and before I knew it, an hour had passed. We'd covered everything: his life in Seattle, my divorce, his mother's declining health, my new teaching career. He asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime, and I surprised myself by saying yes. We started meeting up once a week at a little cafe downtown, then twice a week. Kellen was kind, funny, and refreshingly honest. He'd been through his own divorce years ago and understood the complicated process of rebuilding your life. He didn't try to fix me or save me. He just listened. And slowly, carefully, we became friends. We took things slow, no pressure, no expectations. Just two people enjoying each other's company, taking walks with Copper, cooking dinner together, watching movies on the couch. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. Not because I needed a man to complete me, I'd learned that lesson the hard way, but because I'd learned that I was complete on my own. Kellen was just a bonus, a pleasant addition to a life I'd built myself. I didn't need him. I wanted him. And that made all the difference. One night, about 4 months after we'd reconnected, we were sitting on my porch swing watching the sunset, and he said, "You know what I admire most about you?" I looked at him. "What?" "You didn't let what happened to you make you bitter," he said. "You could have closed yourself off, decided all men were trash, given up on happiness. But you didn't. You rebuilt. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met." I felt tears prick my eyes, but they were good tears. Healing tears. "I didn't have a choice," I said. "I could either let it destroy me, or I could use it to become someone better. I chose better." I think about that Thursday afternoon sometimes. The text that changed everything. The moment my world fell apart. And I realize now that it wasn't the end, it was the beginning. The beginning of me finding my strength, my voice, my worth. The beginning of me learning that I didn't need anyone else to validate me, to complete me, to make me worthy of love. I was worthy all on my own. Garrett and Pascal didn't destroy me. They freed me. They showed me who they really were, and in doing so, they gave me permission to walk away from a life that was making me miserable. They gave me the push I needed to become the person I was always meant to be. So if you're reading this, or watching this, and you're going through something similar, whether it's a cheating spouse, a toxic family member, a friend who betrayed you, or any kind of devastating loss, I want you to know this: you will survive. You will heal. And on the other side of that pain, you'll find a version of yourself that's stronger, wiser, and more resilient than you ever imagined. It won't be easy. Some days you'll want to give up. Some days you'll cry until you can't breathe. Some days you'll wonder if the pain will ever end. But it will. I promise you, it will. And when you come out the other side, you'll look back at that moment, that terrible, awful moment when everything fell apart, and you'll realize it was actually the moment everything fell into place. The moment you stopped settling. The moment you chose yourself. The moment you decided you deserved more. Trust me. I'm living proof. I'm 49 years old now. I'm teaching 5th grade at the local elementary school, and I love it. I have a home I adore, a dog who makes me laugh every day, and friends who actually value me. I have Callan, who treats me with respect and kindness and makes me feel seen in ways I never did before. But most importantly, I have myself. I have my strength, my independence, my peace. And nobody, not Garrett, not Pascal, not anyone, can ever take that away from me again. That Thursday afternoon, when I got that text, I thought my life was over. But really? It was just beginning. Thank you so much for being here with me through this journey. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share it with anyone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling me what you thought. I read every single one. What would you have done in my situation? And remember, you are enough. You always were. You don't need anyone to validate your worth. You are worthy all on your own. Until next time, take care of yourself. Choose yourself. Love yourself. You deserve it. Red Heart.